Hello and welcome to Link Ahead, the City of Dublin podcast. I'm Lindsay Weisenauer, Director of Communications and Public Information.
I'm Bruce Edwards, Digital and Brand Manager for the City of Dublin. Question for you. What do The Wind in the Willows, the Columbus Black Theater Festival, and A Dr. Seuss Christmas Carol have in common? These shows and so many more are coming to Dublin's Abbey Theater.
Yes, and all of these performances are under the direction of today's guest, Joe Bishara, the Abbey Theater Supervisor. Joe, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Bruce and Lindsay.
Absolutely. We are so excited to have you with us. The Abbey Theater is getting so much buzz recently, winning 12 Broadway World Columbus Awards. Congratulations on all the success.
Well, thank you very much. I was joking about it when we had a staff meeting to discuss that, and all I said was, they like us. They really like us.
They love you.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. We've had a tremendous amount of community response to the depth and breadth of programming that we're trying to provide the community, and it was just kind of overwhelming to see that much of an outpouring to say, hey, it is good, Joe. Keep going.
Yeah, it is. It's great. And as I understand it, you have collaborated on more than 200 theatrical productions across the country. What drives you to bring the arts alive on stage?
So I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek and his books, Start With Why, Find Your Why, Leaders Eat Last. And so your why phrase, right? So my why phrase is I aspire to inspire thought and feeling. And that's what art is all about. So that's what drives me. I really enjoy bringing people together, artists and people who like to bear witness to art, and try to get them to see something that hopefully they'll talk about for the next 30 minutes after the show, maybe come up and talk to me about. One of my favorite pieces I ever worked on was kind of polarizing. And I had someone talk to me about it literally 3 years after I produced it. And they said, I've been meaning to talk to you about this for 3 years. And it really they had a hard time processing it. And I said, you know what? I said, this is why I make art 3 years after you saw the show. So that's what drives me.
We'll certainly talk more about your career and the many things that you're involved in all over Central Ohio. But there are probably some listeners out there who would be surprised to know that there is a 200-seat state-of-the-art theater right in our backyard at the Dublin Rec Center. Can you tell us a little more about the Abbey?
I would love to. So the Abbey was actually brought to the community in the year 2000. And I interacted with the Abbey on a couple of instances before I began working full-time for the city. The prior theater supervisor would bring in programming that I was interacting with, sometimes when I was directing a piece downtown and then he wanted to come here for a weekend. Or it was sometimes pieces that I was actually participating in as a performer. So for a number of years, it was operating basically as that, a weekend spot where you could come and see a show that was traditionally playing downtown, or it was geared more towards opportunities for families and young audiences to interact with the space. What we're doing now is different. So we are bringing in theater companies that actually don't have a home of their own and saying, would you like to produce your work here? Because we believe what you are doing is something that the community would like to interact with. So we have 3 resident arts groups that are actually receiving funding from the Dublin Arts Council now to produce their plays at the Abbey Theater of Dublin. In addition to that, the Abbey is now producing their own productions. We have a half a dozen productions that are for families and young audiences that we're producing in 2022. In addition to that, we're also producing 2 world premiere plays this year. So there's not a shortage of things for the community to interact with from ages 8 to 88.
There are also theater festivals like the Columbus Black Theater Festival in July and the South Asian Festival in September. Tell us about the importance of collaborating with regional theater efforts.
So I'm very, very passionate about trying to identify ways to interact with the depth and breadth of the artists in this community. So one of the things that really drew me to working here was the city's ongoing efforts with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I went, great, because I have a lot of diverse artists that I work with, and they want to come and play in my new sandbox. So the Columbus Black Theater Festival actually began producing the Columbus Black Theater Festival here last year in the summer of 2021. They're coming back in 2022. The Conservative Theater Festival did a virtual production, all virtual production in 2021. They just had their in-person event in 2022. And the South Asian Theater Festival will be hosted here for the first time in the fall of 2022.
So what makes the Abbey Theater such a special place to experience a show?
It's an intimate space, 200 seats with the audience raked, which makes it feel like you're actually like eavesdropping on a conversation. So you can still have a lot of people around you to experience an event, but it still feels like you're up close and personal with the artists. It's also a testament to the city's commitment to creating a substantive programming space, that we have just state-of-the-art audio equipment. We have a wonderful projection system. Our lighting system is going through a series of modifications. If you were to walk into that space, if you had worked in New York, if you worked in Chicago, you worked across the pond in London, you'd go, wow, this is industry standard equipment in a very intimate space that I would love to make art in.
We host our employee State of the City there, so I know every time we walk in, it just, as soon as you walk in there, the sound is amazing.
Yeah, it's a great mix, right? I felt very fortunate when I came to work for the city that the prior supervisor had done an amazing job of identifying equipment that suited the space, but also had hired some exceptional theater technicians who know how to utilize the equipment to its optimum effect.
Joe, you've accomplished a lot in a short period of time. In just a couple of years, you've been through a pandemic, a rebrand. You've kind of redefined the whole Abbey Theater experience. Tell us how you've opened the door for a whole new audience.
I try to program things that I want to see and bring in artists that I think would really provide, again, an opportunity for this community to look at things through a different lens. And that's what's really important to me. Especially on the education side, I believe that theater transcends the stage, and theater can happen anywhere. And so when the pandemic came, that's when we shifted gears and we created the Virtual Theater Project. At first, it was interacting with artists from the comfort of their own home, and then slowly but surely we would bring them into the theater and use multiple cameras to make it feel as if the audience was in the theater with the artists. But the ultimate goal is always to, especially with our youth programming, but even with the older actors that we work with, is that for them to understand empathy and collaboration. And I think that that's one of the most amazing things about theater, is that you can always walk away and go, wow, I never thought of it that way, or I didn't expect to feel that after seeing that. And I think that that's what guides me. That's my North Star. And I think as long as we're looking at it that way, that we're trying to serve the needs of this community, and there's a lot of different needs, then I think that my hope is that it will make people who haven't considered that venue as a place that they want to interact with, they'll give it a shot. And I think once they give it a shot, they'll be like, wow, every other week there's something brand new there. And so it's just a matter of creating muscle memory with the community and have them go, this is operating differently than what I thought it would. And I'd really like to interact with it on a more consistent basis.
You mentioned the pandemic. During COVID, people realized they really missed the performing arts when we couldn't go to the theaters. Do you think there will be a post-COVID theater boom for performing arts?
I can tell you that we were starting to feel that in the summer. We did a Plays in the Park series because we only had the theater open to 50% capacity. And so we produced 3 shows, and all 3 shows were completely sold out. So I do think people are missing that opportunity to come together. Theater is a shared experience. The arts, for the most part, concerts, those are shared experiences. I think people want to come together and experience things. So I am eagerly looking forward to, as the pandemic winds down and we're able to increase the capacity in the space, to see how the community interacts with the space.
Let's talk about the current season at the Abbey. Rent, The Claw, The Moment, City Jail, and Disney Descendants the Musical. And that's just to name a few. Joe, what's unique about this upcoming season?
Well, what I like about it is that it's a great mix of new works plus works that the community is familiar with. And that's the hope, right? The hope is that if you're familiar with Rent, that you go, wow, I want to see that. And then you come in and go, wow, that was very well done. Maybe I'll take a chance on The Moment, which is a brand new musical, which has never been produced in the state of Ohio. And we just have a very unique opportunity to be the first organization to be producing it here due to some connections that I have through my prior years not being here. Same thing with City Jail. City Jail is a world premiere play written by Catherine Adams, who happens to be married to former Mayor of Columbus, Greg Lashutka. And we have workshopped this piece twice, once in 2021, and we just recently workshopped it again in January of 2022. So a chance to literally see a piece go through all of its machinations and then have its premiere here is something really, really special. And so then you go, wow, they did that piece that I knew really well, really well. Now they're doing new works. I wonder what's next. I just want to light the spark.
So tell me about a teenage version of Rent the musical. Is there a modification to the script?
Yes, that's a great question, by the way. Musical Theater International is a licensing agency where you can acquire scripts. And one of the wonderful things that they have done is that they've identified that there are high schoolers that would love to have the opportunity to tell these stories. So Musical Theater International works hand in hand with the creators of shows to say, would it be possible to slightly modify this so it is something that is digestible for youth artists to perform and youth artist communities to embrace? So when we produced Les Miserables, that's how we did it. We actually did the school edition of Les Miserables, and audiences loved it. There weren't any issues, which I breathed a very, very deep sigh of relief. And I said, well, if this is okay, then I'd like to do this again, but with a completely different style of musical. And I love Rent. I grew up listening to Rent. I still vividly remember when I think of Rent, I think of, I can go back to that summer driving around with my windows down in the car, heading towards my friend's house and going, man, I bet the people in my town that don't know what this music is because it just sounded so unique and new and fresh. And so I think about it, and I was in high school, I was a senior in high school. And still to this day that, some music is timeless. For youth artists that are passionate about musical theater, Rent still feels as fresh now as it did then. I won't tell you the year.
And you are a big advocate for new theatrical works, having created the Dublin Virtual Theater Project and served 6 years as program coordinator for the Greater Columbus Arts Council Playwriting Fellowship Program. Okay, fill in the blank here. The health of the performing arts in Central Ohio overall is
stable for the moment. I would tell you that the arts organizations received a tremendous amount of help from on the state level and on the city level. Specifically here, we're very blessed with the Ohio Arts Council and the Greater Columbus Arts Council and the Dublin Arts Council and the Columbus Foundation. There's a tremendous amount of work being done on the foundation side to make sure that nonprofit theater will be able to get through this pandemic. That being said, I think if you're not being smart about your programming, then you have the opportunity to, I don't know how to say this nicely. We're very fortunate that the city has provided us an opportunity to use our budgeting funds to provide art for the community at large. My concern with the other nonprofit organizations is that they're not programming in a way that actually will draw. You sometimes have to throw people a bone, right? So I'm saying, like, there's a reason why I produced Les Mis last summer. There's a reason why I produced Rent. They're both wonderful shows, but they also are things that people can wrap their brains around. They can embrace that. They know it. It's familiar. So if arts organizations can meet people halfway, give them something familiar, do it well, and then you're going to have people more inclined to do something, take a risk on something.
You hit the nail on the head here. I think a lot of people in Dublin and in the surrounding communities really have an appreciation for theater, and our city council continues to show support for these efforts. Tell us from your perspective why the performing arts are so important to invest in places like Dublin.
This is such a thriving community, and it's become a destination for people that don't live in this community to bear witness to, with the bridge, North Market, all those wonderful restaurants on either side of the bridge. You can make an evening out of being here, and it doesn't have to stop after the restaurant. It doesn't have to stop after going to 16-bit. You can spend a weekend here, and there's not a shortage of things to do. And I think that, for people who have not experienced Dublin recently, if they come here, I think they're going to be blown away. And that was something I really wanted to be a part of. I really wanted to say, arts and culture, you've got it here, and so that's something I'm working with the other resident arts groups at the space. I'm saying you need to interact with the restaurants on either side of the bridge. Try to talk to them. Let them know that you are here, and then they can generate awareness about you and vice versa. I think that there's just so much potential for what we're doing at the Abbey and how the Abbey interacts with the rest of the community to make it so it's a theater destination, something that's akin to how people are gravitating towards the bridge, how people are gravitating towards the ice rink at the bridge, how people gravitate towards the North Market. That's my aspiration, that people talk about Dublin, they talk about the Abbey just as much as they're talking about the Link, as they're talking about what's not that far from the zoo. It's that's where Muirfield is. That's where the Irish Festival is. So it's lofty, but I also think it's within reach.
Joe, you've worn so many hats in the theater world, and I understand you're quite the accomplished actor. Now, what role stands out in your mind as the most memorable you've ever played, and why?
Well, I had the good fortune of playing the role of Ash in Evil Dead, the musical. Yes. So, sawing off my own hand,
where was this shown?
So
and what was it rated?
Yeah, it definitely had an R rating associated with it. But it was at Catco, my prior employer before I came here. I was there for over a decade in a couple of different capacities. But it was the first year that I was there, and they decided they wanted to do that because the rights became available. And they said, "Okay, Joe, this is what you're doing." And I went, "Okay, not exactly the show I thought would be my Catco debut." But it was a load of fun. I mean, you get to play an action hero, but also in a musical. And so for a musical theater person like me who loves action movies, I was like, this is like my dream come true. And so it was very well received. It was only supposed to run for 3 weeks. It ran for 8 weeks. And then we did it again for another 4.
Okay, while we're on the subject of favorites, time to put you on the spot with some personal favorites.
Okay.
If you had a week in New York and could see any 3 shows, past or present, what would be your top 3 and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay. So I love Shakespeare. And in 2014, Kenneth Branagh did an immersive production of Macbeth in New York. It wasn't on Broadway. It was like he rented out this huge warehouse, and you literally walked from room to room, and then you saw all the different scenes of Macbeth unfold. And I came so close to going and seeing it. And then I had something come up family-wise, and so the weekend I was going to go, oh, it's busted, I can't go. I love rock musicals. So Rent is definitely something that I wish I could have seen with the original Broadway cast. I fell in love with that recording. I remember like driving around in my hometown jamming to that. And that's why it's really super exciting that we're going to have the chance to produce that with high school artists this summer. And last but not least is I like a lot of the new musicals that are coming out. And so a piece that got robbed at the Tony Awards, Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812. Everyone knows it because Josh Groban was in it. But that aside.
Can you give us your best Josh Groban?
I can do a Josh Groban if you want me to.
Yes,
I can sing something from it. All right. Oh, gosh, I don't like it. People compare me to him. Okay. So the first part of that show is he's the one who plays Pierre. So he's singing about his life, and he's lamenting his life. So it's dawned on me suddenly. So something like that.
Why did you stop that, by the way? We could have continued that.
Can we get more?
You've seen a ton of shows, I'm sure. And I'm not going to ask what you didn't like. Let's talk about what is your all-time favorite show that you've seen, and why is it your all-time favorite?
Well, I'm going to tell you the first big musical I ever saw. My parents were big fans of The Who. And shortly after the Broadway series started coming to Columbus, they brought in the rock musical The Who's Tommy. And my parents didn't know what to expect, and so they weren't going to spend a ton of money for us all to go because the entire family went. I have an older sister and a younger brother, and so all 5 of us were there, and we sat in the very back of the balcony. I was riveted, and I did not know why. I just thought, wow, this is so amazing being a part of this audience, and it was just electric, and it was just such a wonderful, wonderful performance. I didn't know I didn't know it was going to this is what I was going to do. All I knew is that I felt so fortunate to be in that room. And I think it did. It started to lead me down the rabbit hole. When I came to this late, my sister was very interested in this as a profession, and she flirted with the idea of becoming like a music teacher at some point. I had no clue what I wanted to do. And then it kind of dawned on me. I played soccer for a long time, and then my freshman year of high school, I was hurting my ankles left and right. And I looked myself in the mirror and I'm like, I am not going to get a scholarship to play soccer. But people tell me I have a nice voice. And there's a lot of pretty girls in choir. So so it kind of went from there. But yeah, I mean, that's what lit the spark, was seeing that show. And I always come back to that. And who knows, maybe next time we talk, maybe we'll be producing that at the Abbey. But
Wow.
It's those types of things where you bring people together and you feel that energy. And it's like, I don't think I'll ever get sick of that. And I'm not a big people person, but I am like a theater person, like being in a big crowd of people and bearing witness to something really exceptional. That's something I don't think I will ever get tired of.
Joe, I am an amateur ticket buyer when it comes to going to the theater. If you're purchasing tickets for a show, where do you like to sit?
That's a great question. So a lot of people say, I want to sit in the front row. As a director, especially at the Abbey, because it's such an intimate space, I want to sit in the second tier of seats in the front row, because then I can look at the entire width of the stage. It's within my line of sight. But there's not a bad seat in the Abbey Theater. You can sit in the back and still feel like you are in the thick of it. It's such a wonderful venue. I fell in love with the venue the first time I ever worked in it. And then when I came here for my interviews for it, because some improvements had been made, and I went, this place is even better than what I remember. You're not going to go wrong. You're not going to go wrong buying a ticket anywhere in the Abbey Theater. And by the way, our ticketing fees are non-existent. So you're not paying the same amount for a ticketing fee as you would for the ticket.
Oh, good point.
And there's also free parking. What?
Joe, continue doing the great work that you do, and thanks for joining Link Ahead, the City of Dublin podcast.
Thank you both.
That's Joe Bishara, Theater Supervisor at Abbey Theater.
If you want to learn more about the Abbey, catch an upcoming show, or book the venue for your next event, visit dublinohiousa.gov/Abbey.
And a big shout out to you, our listeners. Thank you for taking the time to connect with your city. Tune in next time as we continue to explore the many personalities and experiences that make Dublin a thriving place to live, work, and grow.